Welcome to the Registry Insider. I'm Bill Seifarth, CEO and Executive Director of the National Registry of EMTs. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about psychometrics and some of the myths associated with it. So joining me today, two of our psychometricians on our team here at the National Registry. We have Dr. Greg Sampson as well as Dr. Brent Stevenor. I want to make sure I pronounce that right. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me for today's episode.
Cool.
Thanks
Hi.
for having us.
Good to be here.
So tell me a little bit about some myths or some misunderstandings that you commonly encounter as psychometricians in terms of our examinations here. And obviously the timing of this is relevant because today, as we're filming this, we're just finishing up standard setting for EMR and EMT. So tell us a little bit about some of the myths that are out there.
Well, one of the things that I hear from people, and it is really important that we talk about this, is that there isn't a norm reference used in our testing. Mm-hmm. So a certain number of people don't have to pass or fail the test. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is a really critical conception that gets spread around, or misconception that gets spread around, that the test is norm referenced. And so if you're teaching in a program or working in a program, you know, you have a certain number of students that are going to go and test, they have to somehow perform better than everyone else to fail a certain number of students, essentially. And that's really not the way the test is built at all.
So not norm reference, but instead is
criterion referenced. Yes. And this is really, I think, especially appropriate for today's conversation, because like you said, we're finishing standard setting. And standard setting is actually where we define and document that criteria for passing the test. So yeah. What do you think, Brent?
Yeah. I found myself saying this multiple times the past couple of days with the SMEs was when we're working with them to try and establish this passing standard for our examinations, we're going through different levels of what percentage of minimally qualified candidates should get this item correct. That's like a question that we talk about over and over again during standard setting. And in our conversations, they would often go, well, like, here's what we think. What should the value be? And we kept saying, standard setting is like, it is what it is. Like, what do you guys think it should be? We don't have a quota. Like, we don't need 30% of people to fail or 25% of people to fail. That would be more of a norm reference thing. Whereas, again, we're criterion reference. So when we're setting this passing standard, we're just like, it is what it is. It is what our subject matter experts help us, and we guide them through this process to try and establish a standard.
And so to be clear, I probably should have said this earlier. Explain to our viewers and listeners what the standard setting process is.
Sure. So standard setting is a really rigorous psychometric activity where psychometricians facilitate a group of industry experts, subject matter experts from the field. And in this case, it's the emergency medical services field. They come together and they look at entire tests that are delivered to people in the testing program, and they make determinations around performance levels that have to exist in that test in order to establish a passing score on that test. And so that is the whole activity of standard setting. Standard setting is not a group of psychometricians coming together and deciding, oh, here's a pass point on a test. A standard setting activity is an activity where the industry comes to the psychometricians and says, here's what people need to do on this test to
be
pass.
Safe and effective EMS clinicians.
That's exactly what's happening. Yeah, and that's what's happened here today.
So related to standard setting and related to our examination, the use of criterion reference versus norm referenced is something that is often misunderstood. So
people think that, there's going to have to be a certain number of people that pass and a certain number of people that fail. And the reality is that in a criterion reference test, 100% of the test takers could pass if they met the criteria.
Yeah, if they met the minimum standard that's set by the SMEs.
That's right.
So that's one myth. What are some other myths that are out there as it relates to psychometrics in our exams?
Yeah, so another myth, interesting conversation that we had with some of our SMEs the past couple of days was describing to them the way a computer adaptive examination works. And 3 of our examinations are computer adaptive. And so Greg and I were working particularly at the EMR level the past couple of days, which is an adaptive examination, and describing to our SMEs what that means and how it works. So one of our subject matter experts was interested in, well, what is the examination adapting to? And basically, the point of a computer adaptive test is to ensure that the candidates receive as accurate of a score as possible that reflects their actual, in this case, EMR competency level. And we were talking about, well, the examination is going to administer items that, based on that candidate's responses to the previous items, are going to give us the most information about whether or not this candidate is above or below the passing standard that is established through standard setting. And one of the topics that came up was, if the candidate is performing poorly on items that assess a certain domain and performing pretty well on items that assess a different domain, are they going to receive items targeted at the domain where they're not performing well? And that is a myth. That is not true. We have established and public-facing test blueprints that are programmed and are actually constraints in our computer adaptive algorithm to make sure that even if candidates receive a different number of items, the proportion of items assessing each of the domains that were identified in the practice analysis is the same. So the test is not adapting to one's performance on items of a certain domain level. It's simply administering them items that are aligned with that candidate's ability level, so we can make sure that the pass-fail decision they receive is accurate.
So where can people go to find that test specifications or blueprint?
That's on our website.
On our website, yeah. NREMT.org. I think it's under About the Examinations is where it is. So that's another misunderstanding or myth that's out there.
Yeah.
So as it relates to the adaptive test, anything else that you feel has surfaced or is a myth or a misunderstood aspect of our adaptive exams?
This is sort of a subcategory of the domain level questions that we're receiving. We've had people ask us questions which are really fair and legitimate questions, like, so if we have a candidate who is answering questions wrong about like a strand or a topic, like, maybe ambulance operations or something to that effect, would they get more questions like on that targeted level, like on that really specific strand level? And again, just like with the domains, the answer to this is no. The test is going to find the most psychometric information about a person's competency level. It's not looking at, did you answer this question about the ambulance operations correctly? That has nothing to do with the next item that you're going to experience. So I think that's a really important point too. The test is very smart. The test is very robust in its algorithm to adapt, but it's not that smart. It's not going to use like those key pieces of language to pick the next question for you.
And so from an even simpler perspective, can you explain how the adaptive test works? So if they get an item correct, the next item is generally more difficult. If they get it incorrect, then it's simpler, generally speaking, correct?
Yeah, so the general pattern of an adaptive examination is basically just that. So let's say, for example, we have a candidate who has an ability level that is at average, and that candidate receives an item that has a difficulty that is well below average, and they get that item correct. Okay, so we know that the candidate's ability is above the difficulty of that item. So the next item that they're going to receive is an item of slightly higher difficulty. Let's say that item is right aligned with the candidate's ability level, and they get that correct. The next item they're going to receive is going to be an item that has a difficulty level that is above the ability level of that candidate. And if the adaptive algorithm is working correctly, and as the candidate progresses through the test, theoretically, that candidate, when they're responding to an item that is well above their ability level, they will get it incorrect. And the reason for doing that is because then when the candidate is completed with the examination, they have received items that were targeted at their ability level, so we can be sure that the score they received is correct. If you have a candidate that, say, is well above average in their ability, and they only received items that were easy. They only received really, really easy items, and they weren't given an opportunity to miss many items. That doesn't give us a lot of confidence in their score because they never responded to items that were targeted to their ability. Just as if you have a candidate that is well below average in their ability and they only get to respond to really hard items and therefore not get any of them correct, we're not able to get an accurate estimate of what their score actually is. So the adaptive test allows for us to administer targeted items to the candidate's ability to make sure that the pass-fail decision they receive is correct.
So I think it's related to that explanation, Brent, you just provided. Why does the National Registry use adaptive testing? What are the reasons?
That's a really good question. And there's a lot of good reasons to use CAT testing.
Yeah.
So let's see, where do we start? First of all, you can imagine that there's a lot of work that goes into building an item. And an item
and
is,
a lot of cost too.
It's an expensive thing to do. So from a development perspective, it makes a lot of sense to want to minimize the risk of an item being out in the world, right? Mm-hmm. We want our items incredibly secure. We don't want to open up Google and find our items online. We don't want to open up, websites and find that our information is out there for people to have pre-knowledge of what's on the test. Mm-hmm. That's not a good situation. And in fact, it's really a bad situation for testing programs. So the main benefit in my opinion, from a CAT is that it really minimizes item exposure. Mm-hmm. It keeps our items secure, and it only gives an item to a person when that person needs to see that and respond to that item. So it's just good test implementation.
So good for security perspective.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what about from related to exposure from a cost perspective too?
So when you limit item exposure, that results in that item is allowed to survive in the bank for longer. Mm-hmm. And as we briefly mentioned, we don't just write these items and plop them on the test. They go through an unbelievably rigorous basically path to the item even makes it onto the test. Mm-hmm. After it goes through rounds of content review. Before Greg and I and our other psychometricians even see the item, it has been thoroughly vetted for content.
Mm-hmm. Then we have multiple panels
of actual subject matter experts. Then it's actually field tested, and then the psychometricians evaluate it. And if the stats of the item are good, then we can put it on the test. If they are not, it's got to go back.
And what's the percentage of items that actually make it through that process?
We were just talking about this today, and we are thinking we're running about half.
Yeah.
So about half of the items that get cooked or baked never even make it to the table, right? They're just it's not that they're discarded.
They're either not valid reliability questions or they're psychometrically not sound.
That's right.
That's correct. Yeah.
And I think one more thing, one of the largest benefits of an adaptive examination is item security, which of course does result in us allowing to use the items for longer. Mm-hmm. But in my opinion, the biggest benefit of an adaptive examination is they maximize measurement precision of the candidates taking the test. If you just have a set of 100 items that everyone can respond to, that test is not adapting to the ability
individual's abilities
of the people taking the test. So we at the registry have the capability to develop large item banks for some of our examinations to make them adaptive. And that allows us to increase the measurement precision and increase the confidence in the scores that the candidates receive.
The other thing I want to add to that, I think this is a really good point. So if you've ever been a test taker like I have, I don't want to go and take 120 questions on a test if I can just take 60.
Right.
And we're really optimizing, because we do think of this as how do we reduce item exposure? There's a direct impact on the test taker themselves.
Yeah.
They don't have to take as many items. They can go in, have a shorter, more expedited testing experience. Because we use precision measurement, we can give them less items and we can know, you are really a rock star candidate and you should be licensed. We don't need to give you another 100 items to know that. We can know that right now.
Yeah.
Also, from a cost perspective, one thing that additionally is that's less seat time. because we have to pay for the seat time for the candidates who are taking the examinations, even if they're live remote proctored exams or if they are taking their examination in a brick and mortar Pearson Center. There is a cost with the time in that seat. So this is another benefit from an efficiency perspective.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So any other myths regarding psychometrics that you have encountered recently, especially over the last few days, having sat through the standard setting process?
I think I would describe it too. Maybe this last one that I've got isn't maybe so much a myth. It's just sort of, I think, eye-opening for subject matter experts to come and spend 2 days with the psychometrics team and learn about the entire process.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's eye-opening for people to see, wow, you pilot test an item on 300 people before it could ever even be scored. Like, we look at 300 data points to know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have this entire design process set up to build just the right items at just the right domain level. That gets through multiple panels. There's just a real sort of eye-opening that happens around the actual process. So
Yeah.
I think that's what's cool about this. That's what's awesome, is getting to share that with people, because a lot of it is just not known. It's like, yeah, there is this massive amount of work that goes on to get a test built, and giving people that view is just, I think, really cool.
One other myth that I've heard a lot, I should say, since July 1st when we launched the ALS exam and leading up to it, was the concern, the fear that because we're adding clinical judgment, the pass rates will plummet for advanced EMT and paramedic. So from a statistical perspective, what happened? Did they plummet?
That's a good question.
No, yeah, they did not plummet, and we're very, very confident in the way that we model and score our responses to our examinations and our examinations. Statistically speaking, the ability that it takes for one to pass the AEMT and paramedic examinations before and after the addition of clinical judgment is exactly the same. It has not changed one bit. And we did a variety of analyses to ensure that the clinical judgment items being added to the examination fit the exam as a whole, provide measurement precision, and also the difficulty of those items, those clinical judgment items, falls within the distribution of difficulty of the items measuring the existing 5 domains that were already on the test.
Okay. Good. Greg, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Brent said. There was, I'll just say this, there was a year of just statistical test planning that went in to make sure that this worked the way it was supposed to work.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't a thing that a group of psychometricians just randomly decided to do. This was thought out, like, very deeply. What analyses do we need to know? What evidence do we need to collect to ensure that this works appropriately and as planned? And I really think that's an important part of this. The reason that it has been successful to add the clinical judgment domain is because it was planned for and built out ahead of time.
Excellent. So yet another myth busted.
Yeah, and we have full transparency around the whole process and even the analyses that we ran. And we worked with our research team and some of our colleagues at Pearson to publish an open access article that's available to anybody in the public, where they can take a deep dive and see what we did to evaluate the validity of those exams.
Awesome.
And I think I would add this too. If you have questions about that paper, give us a call.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if there's someone who wants to know more about it, don't hesitate to give us a ring, send us an email. We like to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it was great sitting through both the EMT and EMR standard setting, and thanks to both of you certainly for coming to Columbus and facilitating one of the 2 groups, and also thanks for joining us for this podcast today.
Of course. Awesome. Anytime.
Thank you as well for joining us, and as always, stay safe. Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you wouldn't mind, please click the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notifications so you can get notifications of upcoming episodes. Also, for the latest and greatest happenings of the National Registry, feel free to go to nremt.org. Thank you very much, and again, stay safe.